It's time again for another Rock Talk with DocRocker. I'm Jeff Bonomo, joined with the DocRocker himself, Danton Arlotto. Tell me, what are we talking about today? Now, this is episode number 5.
Yes.
We only have 4 online. This is episode number 5 because episode 2 got eaten by the internet.
What we're going to do is we're going to refilm that. We're going to bring our boy Marcus Sypick back in, and we're going to have another little conversation about Iron Maiden. We're going to talk about our favorite songs. I know we talked about doing a possible top 20 of talking like the top 20 songs, whether that be like our personal favorites or that be like the ones we think hold up the best out of the whole repertoire. So I forwarded that along to Marcus, and he sent me a list. So that'll be a great way for us to go back and reshoot episode 2. That could be something we do over the next couple weeks. So today,
he already did that. Wait, he already did his top 20.
Yeah, he did. And I did mine too. I don't know if I sent it to you. So
no, I've been having a hard time doing my top 20. It's hard because they have to be in order though. Like number 1 is the number 1 Iron Maiden song.
Oh, see, I have mine chronological. Mine's in number order of.
No. Top 20. It has to be in order.
That changes.
That's what makes it hard.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard. You can't just be like, okay, these are 20 songs I love by them. No, it has to be chronological. 20 is the worst out of 20, and 1 is the best of all time.
Oh, okay. That should be interesting.
That's what makes it hard.
I'll be sure to let Marcus know. So we'll take at least another week.
Yeah, let him know.
And we'll be ready. All 3 of us will have our top 20s, and that'll be a really fun way to revisit episode 2 and bring that back to life. So in the meantime, today we're moving forward. Episode 5, actually, those of you that have been following the show and saw the little bonus episode 4, you already got a big sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about today. As we finished our recording session last week, we transitioned from Maiden to a whole different topic covering nu metal. And we decided that would be a really good kind of stepping off point for today's episode, is to talk more about that, get more into, not even just specifically Disturbed, which is a major point of contention that we can really elaborate on, but even covering some of the other nu metal bands of the scene. And kind of, having that conversation of how do those bands hold up, even though they're not really new anymore, they're still like that pocket of that genre, and that could be a lot of fun to talk about. So that's the idea for today. So we're going to get into some nu metal.
Now, this is a genre that's been around for over 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, let's really describe what nu metal is. Like, we need to have a definition. And I looked it up on Wikipedia. And this is what Wikipedia says. This is their definition of nu metal. Subgenre of alternative metal that combines elements of heavy metal music with elements of other music, such as hip-hop, alternative rock, funk, industrial, and grunge. Nu metal rarely features guitar solos. The genre is heavily syncopated and based on down-tuned guitar riffs, with DJs occasionally featured. Now, I also removed some of the not so flattering descriptions that Wikipedia had of it too, because I want to keep this as non-biased as possible. Okay.
Well, sure.
Yeah, but do you agree with that? That's pretty much what nu metal is.
Yeah, it sounds like it really kind of hits a lot of nails on the head, really, as far as some of the major musical stylistic points, as well as kind of what separates nu metal from other kinds of metal. And I mean, the 2 big ones that come to mind for me are, of course, Disturbed and Slipknot. And yeah, I guess it pretty much like you could probably date some of the earliest nu metal as early as the mid to late 90s. But it like really kind of took full swing in like the early to mid 2000s and probably beyond. So
well, the first nu metal album to hit number 1 on the Billboard 200 was Korn's 3rd album, Follow the Leader, in 1998. So let's use that as a starting point. Let's use that as a starting point of where it hit the mainstream. Of course, it started before that and lasted, like you said, into the mid 2000s. But I'd say I did some research, actually. How about that for once?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Very cool.
1998 was the first time it hit like an album, a nu metal album hit number 1. So that's when it hit the mainstream. And that was like around the same time that, Limp Bizkit was huge too.
Yeah. The late 90s was something to talk about.
That may be why a lot of these bands that are lumped as nu metal get a bad rap. I think Korn did something different. I'm not a huge fan of theirs, but they were doing something different at that time. So I'll have to give them a thumbs up and put them in the good column.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with Korn's stuff. I mean, anything that I've heard, I liked, you know, because I'm pretty partial to new metal, so I'm always okay with it. Like, I remember even just a couple of years ago, like whenever I'd be up in town to visit, and I'd tune into the local radio station in Northeast PA, 97.9X, which is like the all-encompassing rock station, and they usually feature lots of new metal stuff. And I know a couple times Korn songs came on, and I was like, oh wow, this is really Korn is one of those bands that like I still have yet to like really dive into and check out. And I know I owe it to myself to do so, because I bet you I would really, really like it. I had no idea that the third album was that early. I always thought they didn't even really form until after that. So that's news to me. That's a really big surprise. But you know, I like a lot of like the lower tuned, heavier riffs. I like the slower speed that they kind of fill in with more intricate rhythms. That sound always attracted me a lot as a music listener. So yeah, I'll definitely, I'm going to put a little on my little queue. I actually keep a queue on my phone, but I'm just going to write it down to check out. What's the name of that album?
The name of the album was Follow the Leader.
Follow the Leader.
My wife loves Korn a lot more than I do. I'll say that. I don't
Okay.
really. They're not a favorite band of mine at all. I do like a lot of the rhythmic stuff they do, and that it's a lot of what nu metal was. There was a lot more rhythm to it, I guess, than melody. I guess, you know, 'cause like a lot of this,
Absolutely.
And the guitar was played almost like a percussive instrument sometimes, which to me was okay for a bit, but it got a little samey for me.
A cool thing for me about nu metal is like the biggest names in the genre are really unique. You know, like you really can't replicate something like Slipknot. You know,
I was
like
just gonna say Slipknot. Yeah,
their sound is so unique. And I think it's literally because of that band itself why that wiki description employed the use of DJs. Because like that was just, I remember like because both of my older brothers were big Slipknot fans when we were kids growing up, and as a kid I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. I didn't like it. I didn't like how the music sounded. I didn't like the masks. I thought it was just a weird, gross, stupid, silly thing, and I always made fun of them for years. And then I eventually came around much later in life, and like, well, actually what it was is I ended up seeing them live, and they headlined a Mayhem festival. I would say like 2008, 2009, I think, somewhere around there. And I went because I think Disturbed was playing. They were one of the big bands. And at that time I was a really big Disturbed fan, and I was just starting to kind of get into metal, and I was exploring a lot of different stuff. And I thought, yeah, why not? Let's go to a festival and just see what's all there. And we ended up staying until the end of the night, and Slipknot was the final band that performed, and they blew me away. I remember like, wow, I can't believe what an incredible live performance, you know. And you got the two guys coming out with like marching band drums and like all the crazy stuff going on, and like it was just such a spectacle to behold. And that's not even getting into the music content itself, but like I was like really thrashing hard to the whole set.
I wrote them off as a bunch of silly freaks with masks until I saw them live at a Mayhem festival, and I was like, oh my god, there's like 20 people on stage. I don't know what's going on, but it's really tight. It's metal.
Yeah,
it's really, really good.
Undeniably.
You know, and then I went back. So I discovered them like not too long ago. And if you take away the fact that there's like, I don't know, like 25 people in the band, they're all wearing masks. Some people are playing on garbage cans. You take all that stuff away and just listen to the music. It's pretty good, solid metal.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I like a lot of the interconnectivity across a lot of their writing too, from like album to album. You could tell that I'm pretty sure Corey Taylor writes most of it, if not all of it. But you could tell that like he thinks the whole thing through. You can like really see that even in like the earlier albums and connecting it. They just put one out like a year or two ago.
Yeah, I believe so. Somewhere on there. He's all around a really, really good musician, I think. Great voice on that guy, man.
I was going to say he's one of the best rock singers out there.
I've listened to some live videos of him. I watched some live videos of him doing some classic metal stuff. He does a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, he's really really diverse, and you could
Yeah.
hear it even like in as early as like their first 2 or 3 albums. Like, the biggest thing with him with me is just his dynamic range, not so much like his pitch range, but
Yeah.
like every song is a roller coaster ride, and like you get so invested with just the way he delivers each of the lines, and some of the lines are great, you know. Since we're talking new metal, this is a fair warning to all of you viewers out there. There are most likely going to be expletives here, especially when we're talking about the lyrics in these songs. And there is, I want to say it's Disaster Piece, I think the song is, and the opening lyric. Oh my God! I'm scared to even say it. It's just so like in your face, over the top, and it's like one of those things that makes you go like, "Wow, this band is really really serious about something." And the opening line is,
There's something bothering them.
yeah, yeah, and like who knows like what inspiration goes into like the writing of any of this stuff, but like yeah, some of the lyric lines that he comes up with just blow me away, just for how over the top they are. The line is, "I'll slit your throat and the wound." And the first time I heard that and listened to it, I was like, whoa, this is so insane. And just something about
like black metal territory, though.
Yeah, I think it's even going to make some of those corpse paint guys go like, oof, what's that guy's problem?
Whoa, yeah, what's going on with that? Okay, Slipknot.
Mm-hmm.
That they are a band, I'll say, they're considered a classic nu metal band. They're still around. They're still, like I posted on our group on Facebook. Just search Rock Talk with DocRocker. You can find our group. Join our group if you haven't. On that group, I posted a question: are there any nu metal bands around that are still, doing stuff, are still making music that's actually half decent, at least, to say,
Yeah.
Are they still viable right now? And I'll say Slipknot's one of them. Disturbed, let's talk about them. They're another one that I think are still at least in the limelight, if you can be, in nu metal, because pretty much nu metal and rock in general, as far as the mainstream goes, is over. I mean, when was the last big rock band, So,
yeah,
but that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that is absolutely.
Yeah. But Disturbed, they're still around, and they're still making albums, and they're still, putting out at least a half decent quality product.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to note, because a lot of people thought that the genre was dead a few years ago. They took a hiatus, and they announced they were going to be taking a break from touring. They weren't going to stay as a band anymore, and everyone was like, "Oh, well, Disturbed, they broke up. That's it. That's the end of it." And then they actually got back together, and they released an album not long after their reunion. I want to say this was like 2016, 2017. It wasn't that long ago, and they got back together.
And that had their biggest hit on it, I think, right? That had the Sound of Silence cover.
Yeah, the Sound of Silence cover is on there. And even like all of the original content on that album, it's called Immortalized, and it is probably their strongest album. It really is. It floored me, because their album before their break was called Asylum, and at that point, like I was kind of growing a little tired of them, because a lot of it was kind of the same stuff. Like with each of the albums leading up to that, I kind of had something to look forward to. Like you have The Sickness, which is their debut, and that's enough. We could talk about that for a whole episode, so I'm gonna just gloss over it right now. But then you get into their sophomore release called Believe, which is definitely, you could say, is like a top 10 contender for the best cover art in history of metal, any genre, not even just nu metal, because that cover art is awesome. It's an amalgamation of basically every major religious denomination all lumped into one. There's like the Star of David, there's a cross, there's there's all this crazy stuff. I think there's a pentagram on it too, and it's just when you look at it, it makes you think. And I've always really liked that, and especially a lot of the lyrical content. For Believe, they went with like a much more kind of melodic and complex nature, which of course turned a lot of fans away, because they were like, we want all this like raw angry sickness stuff, because like Voices and Stupefy and The Game and all these songs that like made them so kind of, their popularity spread like wildfire.
But those songs that you just mentioned, okay, especially The Game, that sound is what carried over to Believe. Because Believe,
and a lot of fans don't realize that.
I like Believe a lot. That album's my favorite Disturbed album.
Really?
Also, I was the last time I threw up from drinking, I was listening to that album.
Were you listening to Intoxication by chance? Yeah, I think there are some really really strong underrated gems on that album, and it's funny like almost every Disturbed
2002.
band.
I had to think about it. I think it was 2002. Was the last time I threw up.
Yeah, well, hey, that's a pretty good track record. We're going what 18 years, Jeff.
Yeah.
That's not bad. But yeah,
it was right after Believe came out, and we were listening to it in Ed Yank's backyard. I remember the whole night up until a certain point. Ed Yank also gave me some words of advice, words of wisdom that day, and I didn't listen. Off camera, no one needs to know about, but he gave me some words of advice. I didn't listen to him, and then I got myself in some trouble. Ended up throwing up that night. Anyway, Believe is my favorite Disturbed album, and it's because it was more melodic.
Mm-hmm.
And he sang more, I think, on that album than he did in the first one.
Oh,
a little less gritty, and the monkey noises were taken back just a little bit. Because the monkey noises, at first, you loved them, and I'm like, okay, that's all right. They're kind of goofy. Like now, I look back, they're really goofy.
Yeah.
Monkey noise, he doesn't even do them anymore, and he'll tell you. If I talk to David Draymond, I'd be like, David, the monkey noise, come on. Like, yeah, that was a thing. He also used to dress up in like a straight jacket. They had
a whole thing with their live.
All that imagery was just, they're more of a mature band now. That imagery was kind of like, nah, it was kind of kiddie. I call it
like a teenage boy like throwing a tantrum,
which was fine, I guess, for what they were doing. I mean, now look at them now and look at the pictures of them before, and it's like two different bands, because like even how they act on stage is different now. Even how they perform, how they position themselves, they don't do that pogo thing anymore that much, because all that stuff was like, that was the thing to do in 1998, 99, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now in 2020, they're more of a metal band now than ever, I think.
When I really got into them was right when their third album dropped, and I've pretty much been following them since. And like,
which one's that? That's
10,000 Fists.
Okay.
Yeah,
great album.
It is. It's awesome, and we'll get to that. But and like from there, I kind of followed along, and I stayed a fan through the hiatus. When people lost faith, I thought, well, they said break. They didn't say it's over. So, and sure enough, like once Immortalized came out, I was ecstatic, and I listened to it, and I was blown away by it. And but yeah, like I saw them perform probably right around like the 10,000 Fist, Indestructible era, and then I saw them perform after Immortalized came out, and there was a big difference. They really did look like a different band, and they sounded like a different band, and I liked all of it. I liked the early stuff, I liked the later stuff. I like to think I try to keep an open mind about a lot of things.
And before I forget, though, I don't know if you've ever heard Dave Draymond's brother Ben.
Yes.
Ben is fantastic. I love him. I still say he wrote Stricken, because his version of Stricken with the piano, it's just a piano and him singing it. It is so haunting. Now, the original version is great, too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's one of the strongest songs.
One of my favorite Disturbed songs.
Yeah, same.
Man, the Draymond family got it, I think. Yeah, they got some talent, and his brother's just as good. Love that guy's voice.
So
okay, next band on the list for nu metal, Linkin Park.
Okay.
They're not like nu metal like Disturbed's nu metal, but they are considered a nu metal band. And
yeah, I guess technically they are. I never thought of them as a nu metal band, but they were out at the same time, and they had really, really a lot of similarities in style and content. So, wow.
So we'll drop them in there.
Absolutely. We should totally talk about Linkin Park. So, where do we even start?
What's your feelings on them? Because I like them for what they were. I only know their hits.
Same. I never been like a super avid fan, but I mean, so some of their big hits were just everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing it, and
they wrote catchy stuff.
Yeah. And I'm gonna butcher this band on this episode because I don't know them that well. I don't know any of the songs by name, but stuff like "Crawling in My Skin."
Yeah.
And I've always really liked what I heard. I always liked his voice. I liked his singing. I liked his attitude and the fire he brings to his voice when he sings. I love the way the whole band sounds. something about them was just like, even though a lot of the songs were about kind of like depressing content, a lot of them just had like this, something about the nature of the sound was really uplifting for me. And
Yeah.
you know, I was actively involved in a local karate school. It was all Korean style Taekwondo, Tung Sudo, and like a lot of times when we would like do training sessions at the karate school, the instructor would put on like different mixes of stuff for us to listen to, and it randomized. You know, sometimes it was like more like traditional kind of workout music. Sometimes it was like jock jams and stuff like that. But then sometimes like you occasionally get like a Linkin Park song thrown in. Break. I think the song is actually called Break. That one, I think I know it by name. And we would always do that when we would break boards. We would break boards to break, and it was awesome. It was the most fun I've ever had breaking boards was when that music was on, and just something that just got me so amped and so pumped and like so ready to rock. And it's another one of those bands I should really put them on my list, and especially now that Chester's not with us anymore. I should kind of like really go through and do like a really good in-depth retrospective and listen to all the albums that they put out.
Their last album before he passed away was totally different though. Like it
really?
was very, very commercial. Linkin Park did a very, very commercial, not nu metal at all kind of album right before he passed away. I listened to a little bit of that just out of curiosity. But going back to their older stuff, their classic stuff, if you will, I liked how they took a little bit from every genre and just mashed it together, and it worked. It worked really well. It was catchy. It was heavy enough for some people who like heavy rock to really, dig their teeth into it.
Yeah, there's enough guitar riffs in there to appease almost anybody.
Yeah. But then there was also like electronica kind of music tossed in there, a little bit of hip hop here and there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of different styles thrown in there into like a little melting pot called Linkin Park. Off it went.
Yeah,
and
it blended together very, very nicely, and it led to something really, really unique.
Another band like that is just pulling stuff from way over here. System of a Down.
Oh yeah, they're totally nu metal. Yeah, absolutely. And
they're so good.
They're really, really good.
The only gig we did in the summer when we were driving back with your brother, by the way, viewers, Danton's brother Adam sings in the band that I'm in. So we were driving back about an hour or so drive back from the gig, last gig we did. Social distance, by the way. We were careful. We listened to System of a Down. First time I've listened to it in years. He just threw on like a random playlist of all their stuff. Vocally it's incredible, and I didn't even know Adam was telling me the singer and the guitar player do a lot of the vocal harmonies together, and it's just excellent stuff. Weird, it's like it's not
it's not normal at all, and it's
not normal. It's not your usual stuff, but it's and the way the songs just twist and turn, it's fantastic. You can say it's
borderline progressive. Some of those songs.
Oh God, yeah. Progressive nu metal. There you go. There's a label for them if there is one.
Yeah, for sure, and especially for any haters out there that like aren't into what we're talking about today, you can't deny that all of the bands we've touched on today are unique. You hear 2 bars of a System of a Down song and like, oh yeah, that's got to be that crazy band from like the early 2000s, like with the dude with the big crazy beard and like whatever. And wake up, or like you just hear David Draymond sing 2 notes. You hear Chester Bennington sing 2 notes. You hear some DJ scratches combined with a heavy guitar riff and drop B on a Slipknot song. Like these bands are indistinguishable from each other and from anything else. And
I hate to say it, but you know what? You know a Limp Bizkit song when you hear it too.
Yeah, you do.
These are really bad lyrics over a really good drum beat. Listen, when he rhymed leadership with leave your shit on one of his songs, I was done. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm done. I can't take it anymore. But I will say it again. The drummer's fantastic. I can't remember the guy's name, but the drummer from Limp Bizkit from the classic album is a fantastic guy. And their guitar player ain't no slouch either. All those musicians in that band, they're good, man. They're really good.
Right. We just have a very special reservation for Fred Durst.
Everybody does. He's laughing all the way to the bank anyway.
Well, sure, yeah. It doesn't really matter what people think of him because he's already found his success story. But yeah, I've never like super hated them. I never really liked them. But the thing I've always, like I have one reason for not liking Fred Durst, and it's the same reason that every Slipknot fan is on the same page with me on this. But there was a really famous, or I guess infamous, turned famous. I forget if it was like a live concert, I think, and like Fred Durst like was on stage and he like got on the box and he was like talking all this smack on Corey Taylor and saying like how the band sucks and how he's not he's like terrible singer, and he was just saying all kinds of like real negative, hateful stuff. So some Slipknot fan made this like really, really cool artwork of, are you familiar with this? The no. Fan art? Oh, it's awesome. You'll have to Google this and check it out and put it in when you're editing the episode. But it's got Fred Durst nailed to a cross, and all the members of Slipknot are gathering around it, and like two of the guys on the bottom have like lighters and matches, and like they're all just kind of looking at him and smiling. And it's funny, even though they're wearing masks, like all the masks are made to be smiling. So yeah, it got all over the internet, and I know my older brother Blaze, who was a big Slipknot fan, like found like a poster of that and like had it hanging in his bedroom for years, and it was just such a cool thing to look at, and it was really satisfying. And any Slipknot fan who's not familiar with that piece of art should find it and check it out, because it's a real treat. So like I said, infamous moment turned famous by a dedicated fan. And I missed
really out cool. on a lot of that. I missed out on a lot of that because I really didn't follow these bands even back then. Like, I was still clinging on to, and hoping in the late 90s, like the metal bands I loved would release something good. But back then, there were probably still more of these metal bands listening to what their agents or what the record company executives were saying. Like, you need to sound more like Limp Bizkit or Godsmack even, or Disturbed or Slipknot.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even get into Godsmack.
Godsmack? Oh, Godsmack was good for the first two albums. Then they became very, very boring.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what I have to say about them. But when they got Shannon Larkin on drums, he's a beast. I've followed his career since he was in a band called Wrathchild America back in the 80s. Their drummer Shannon Larkin is fantastic. I love that guy. If he came in the room, I would be like a complete fanboy. Like, I would just, because he's such a great drummer, such a tasteful drummer, and he plays in Godsmack now. He wasn't on the first two albums, but
I was going to say, because I know the first two albums rather well.
Sully played on the first album. Sully played drums, I believe, on the first album.
Oh, did he? That I didn't know.
Think so, or at least on the demos, because he's a drummer. But the first album, and second album, I can't deny those two albums by Godsmack are really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of real nasty songs on there that are really, really fun.
Bad Religion, Keep Away. I haven't listened to the album in probably 15 years, but they still, you hear them, like you said, you know exactly what they are when you hear it on the radio.
Yeah, it's indistinguishable for sure.
As far as I'm concerned, they're the cream of the crop. As far as the new metal bands go, you got a whole bunch of other ones that have like one hit, like Static X, which is Wayne Static was ridiculous. That's why I got a kick out of him, because it was ridiculous. Another Drowning Pool, you got the Counting Song.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forgot their new metal too. It's one of those really diverse genres that it's like so like and then it's funny enough, all of these bands, as different and diverse as they sound, they all have some of those key elements according to that wiki definition.
POD is another one. Remember POD? Youth of the Nation. No.
I know that song. I never knew who the artist was.
Yeah,
I never,
POD.
I never
They're
knew
like a Christian new metal band or something.
Huh. That's interesting.
And everything that we mentioned, now that I'm thinking back at it, there was a lot of like rhythmic elements to it, which you think I would like more than I do.
Right. Well, it's one of those things, like, it's not always like, there are so many stereotypes with like a musician, like, oh, if this person's a drummer, he's gonna like this music that's like super percussive. That's not really true at all.
And a lot of these drummers that are great, a lot of these drummers for these bands, they're they're not slouches. I'll tell you, and like
to play a lot of those like really complex, like really staccato heavy like riffs of any of these
right.
new metal songs by these bands, it takes a real good understanding of timekeeping and knowing how to do proper subdivisions and how to like really manipulate a groove and do all kinds of really technical stuff. And
yeah, because that groove is important to this genre. It's really important.
It's one of the key ingredients.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, you can't do that. And if you're doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, your foot's doing something way off and
it's doing all the keys, fuzz, and ands. It's not doing any downbeats at all.
Because and you have to be in sync with the accents on either the guitar or the bass.
Yeah, usually all three are lined up perfectly.
Okay, some people on our board mentioned Rage Against the Machine as a nu metal band, and I had to say no. They've been around since 1991. I don't consider them a nu metal band. I don't know how to classify that band. Like alternative rap rock, hip hop, metal, something. I don't know. I don't want to call them a nu metal band. I don't know what to call them.
Yeah, they're definitely different enough. I would argue the opposite. I'm kind of on the side of people that are saying it because if you break it down by that definition that we found and elaborated on with the other bands of like, all right, there's hip hop elements in the vocals, there's heavy guitar distorted riffs, there's crunchy syncopated rhythms across the rhythm section of the band. So, all of those components are true in Rage Against the Machine. So
perhaps they are the godfathers of nu metal.
They are. I mean, you could easily argue they might be one of the progenitors of the genre. And who's to say? What we'd have to do is look into interviews with some of the later acts that came out. Like look at Slipknot, look at Disturbed, look at Linkin Park, and see if any of them credit Rage as an influence. That'll be your answer.
I know a band that they do credit a lot. A lot of these bands credit Faith No More.
Around what time did they first come out?
Faith No More has been around since the early 80s.
Okay.
Now, the album in particular is The Real Thing, which came out in the late 80s, probably around 88, 89 maybe. That's the one with Epic on it.
Okay. Epic, I know. Okay.
That whole album, if you listen to that whole album, is pretty much a blueprint for all the nu metal bands because there's all kind of different genres thrown in there. There is heavy guitar. There is rapping. There is keyboards. There is all kind of stuff. And every song on that album sounds different. It's a great album. Fantastic album. And Mike Patton, the vocalist, could do all kind of wonderful things with his voice. He can rap with the best of them. He could scream like a metal singer, and he can growl. And he could sing like a jazz singer, too, on the one song. He sings a song called Edge of the World. He sings like a jazzy guy. But I have a quote from him right here on my computer. He says, "I feel no responsibility for that kind of music. It's their mother's fault, not mine. I have nothing to do with it."
That's a great quote.
Mike Patton, I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Patton and all the stuff he's done. If you're not familiar with him,
no, I'm not.
Get familiar with him, and especially Faith No More. They have 2 albums without Mike in the beginning, which are decent albums. But when Mike Patton joined for the album The Real Thing, which was a huge hit right around the time you were born, back in like,
is that the one with Epic on it?
Yeah, that's the one with Epic on it. That's his first album with Faith No More.
Okay.
That's fantastic to get into it, Like if someone wants to get into Faith No More, that's the album you start with. Okay. Angel Dust, the second one with him is good but dark. Disturbed did a cover of Midlife Crisis from the Angel Dust album. My favorite album by Faith No More is one called King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime. That was mid-90s. Again, another one that has a lot of these nu metal elements to it. So that's a guy who really doesn't want to be connected to pretty much anything. No, he's a little wacky in the head, but
most of the best artists are.
But he's one of the best vocalists that I've ever heard, just because of the different things he could do with his voice. Going back to our first episode when you were talking about singing and you were talking about knowing your instrument. He knows his instrument, his voice, and he does some wild stuff with it, man.
That's really cool. I'll have to give him a listen and check him out because it's one of those, like, I've heard Epic because it plays on rock stations, but like that's pretty much
they
it.
still play it today. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, I'm getting the impression that I'm doing this band a horrible disservice by just, kind of looking on the surface and like, oh yeah, that song's really cool or whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna go through at least those 2 albums, if not the rest of it, and give it a good listen and see for myself what it's all about. And it's interesting now, like, because like it's really easy. Like as soon as you mention like, oh yeah, this guy, this band is a nu metal band, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But like when you think about what's a nu metal band, it's hard to come up with an answer unless you're familiar with the scene. And it's been really interesting today to kind of get into these bands in a little more detail and to really see, as diverse and different as they all are, how much they all have in common. That's what's really kind of striking a chord with me, because I always thought like, oh yeah, they're like Disturbed because it's kind of like its own genre. Like, you can't sound like David Draymond.
Right.
I know I'm contradicting myself when we talked about the vocal techniques in that first episode. You can, if you know how to manipulate the instrument, but like stylistically and artistically, like no one sounds like Disturbed. No one sounds like Rage. No one sounds like Linkin Park.
Right.
But they're all nu metal. So that's really, really interesting.
I think that was it's the problem with all of these genres that really hit the mainstream hard, is the people that make the money off of these artists, they want 1,000 Disturbs, they want 1,000 Slipknots. The same thing happened in the 80s with the hair metal bands. They wanted the hair to be bigger. They wanted the guitars to be lighter sounding. They wanted the songs to be more about partying and girls and this and that, and up and up and up and up and up until it was like, there's too much of it.
It got oversaturated. Yeah. Metal will never die. It just takes different shapes and forms.
Yeah, sure.
And it's part of the fun of the ride, is to see what happens next.
I have no idea. But the internet that's leveled the playing field as far as finding bands and finding what you like about a certain band. Like if you like that sound that Disturbed has, we'll say, you can find bands that are doing still that kind of style. Whether or not they're as good, I don't know. But if you look hard enough, you can. And if you like nu metal and you like that style, you can find bands still doing that and enjoy it. And that's music for you, And I won't blame you.
The beauty of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you like rap rock, you could find bands still doing that. Rap rock, nu metal. We're getting to the end here, but I have to mention White Zombie. I mean, White Zombie and Rob Zombie, they have all those, the list of traits that nu metal has. That band and his soul stuff, they have a lot of that. Marilyn Manson. Forgot about Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. I feel like the longer we go, the more we're going to just keep pulling names. We're going to keep finding artists that fit this kind of blender of a genre here.
And that's what it was. They blended a lot of everything that was popular, like 10 years before that. They, like you said, they blended. I think they blended the hip hop and the rap pretty decently for what it was.
Yeah, and a lot of different artists did that successfully, and each of the artists who did so successfully did it in a way that was kind of unique to the band. Like you could compare like Rage Against the Machine to Linkin Park. They really don't sound that much alike, but they really do have a lot in common stylistically, and they both have a really awesome implementation of hip hop or rap style vocals with a more rock metal oriented sound.
I thought of another one. They're a metal band. They did a quote-unquote rap rock song with Public Enemy. Anthrax. They did Bring the Noise with Public Enemy.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Really nice. And they did I'm the Man in the 80s, which was, it could be called a nu metal song because you got heavy guitar riffs and you're rapping over it. I'm the Man was a joke. Bring the Noise wasn't, man. That was awesome. Bring the
Noise is the only, that was definitely the first Anthrax song I've ever heard, and that just led me to believe that that's what their overall sound is like. And then I found out years later that no, they're more like a kind of traditional metal band.
They are.
Like, wait, Anthrax is metal? Bring the Noise isn't really that metal. It's more of like a kind of, just, I don't know what it is, but it's not metal. But
yeah, I mean, the music's metal, but a rapping over top of it. Now, Anthrax, you got to give them credit. I'm sure Bring the Noise, influenced at least Fred Durst.
Yeah, you could definitely trace it because it's
Rock.
Stylistically so similar to. Oh, we dare not speak his name. No, I shouldn't do that, because we're trying to keep a kind of like, of course, a lot of this is going to be like opinion based kind of stuff anyway, but we are going to try to give every artist a fair kind of bit of time here and actually say something, kind of interesting or, thought provoking about them.
I really liked Devil Without a Cause when it came out.
I never liked Kid Rock, even when he was like the coolest thing on the scene, and he was all about it.
Sorry.
I just never liked him. I never liked how he sounded. I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. I haven't really lost sleep trying to figure it out, but it was one of the, like, my Kid Rock is your Fred Durst. Let's leave it at that. And I remember, because I was like super into like a lot of this new metal stuff, and I was like, when I was in high school, I was a Hot Topic frequenter, and I had a whole collection of various accessories and paraphernalia. I had this like weird hat with like a skull piercing on it, and like all this stuff that I would wear, and I would deck myself out. I
had a jean jacket with back patches on. It's no different.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we can have a whole thing on how metalheads accessorize themselves. That could be another interesting topic we talk about. But I remember I was all decked out. I was on vacation with my mom and my aunt, and we went into a store to pick something up, and the clerk said to me, he's like, "Yo, you look like Kid Rock." And I said, "Sir, you are badly mistaken. See, I'm a musician."
Oh, well, on that note, we should close it out.
Sorry, all you Kid Rock fans. I'm sure I'll find something nice to say about him in the future.
There's probably not that many Kid Rock. There's probably not that many Kid Rock fans left. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well,
but we should close it out. Do you have any final thoughts on new metal before we move on?
My final thought is I got some listening to do. I want to really go back and revisit some of these artists, especially the ones I don't know that well. Linkin Park is a big one. Faith No More is probably top of my list. So for me, it's like, I feel like this just opened a can of worms for me personally, of like me on my own musical journey to kind of continue to go out and consume different content and figure out what it's all about. It's what I love so much about teaching is I'm always exposed to music I don't know, and I get to kind of jump in and figure that stuff out, and I find lots of new things that I really like. So I have a nice, pretty big list here. And Anthrax too, because now that I know that they were really so much more than some of that early kind of new metal-y stuff that they kind of dabbled with just for fun. Like I really want to go and check them out, and that is definitely an episode coming in the future where we'll talk about those pillars. I know we've already started on the Facebook group. There's already been a lot of conversations. Just talking about Metallica and Megadeth, and that's just as easily as we could sit here and do episode after episode about Iron Maiden, we could just as easily do it about those artists too.
What this episode did for me, at least, was lessen my hatred of new metal. I'll tell you that. As we start talking, I start thinking back, and I'm like, oh yeah, that band does have a lot of good songs. That band does have a lot of good songs. Even if they're just the hits, and even if they're just the ones that we talked about, I'm going to go back and probably revisit a lot of old Disturbed stuff. Definitely going to listen to more System of a Down. I've been doing that anyway after your brother got, kind of back into that. I started listening to them more. But to anyone watching, if you hated new metal back then, really go back and take a listen to the bands that we were talking about today. They're all unique in their own way. And I think personally, they're all really close to they're probably the closest ones to classic metal out of that whole genre are these
out of
bands
that time period.
Yeah, from that time period. Yeah, there's a lot of classic metal in a lot of these bands that we talked about, because that was a lot of things that turned people off, was the fact that there wasn't a lot of like that normal classic rock and stuff that you're used to. They just put a little bit of a twist on it, and I still say monkey noises are silly, but to each his own.
Right.